Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025, and today we're going to be answering three questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last few days. And as we do each week on the Roundup on Monday morning. That newsletter is available in two different formats, either through an email version that you can get by signing up on our website at smieconsulting.org/subscribe, or you can get the LinkedIn version of that if you prefer to digest your international ed news through notifications on LinkedIn. Both of those newsletters will come out early Monday morning, and between the two of them now, we have over 2,600 subscribers to the newsletter in its different formats, and I'll be dropping links to this week's edition, the website, and all the news stories that lead to these questions we cover today in the chat today. So please, if you're watching on repeats, if you find it on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, you can go back to the original recordings if you want the links, or just subscribe to the newsletter and you'll get all those delivered in your inbox. It's usually a 5-10 minute read every Monday morning. You get all of that Monday morning so that you're prepared and can probably guess what some of the news stories are that we'll be covering here on Wednesday afternoon, Eastern Time. So as we do each week, we want to give a special shout out to those obviously watching live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. We're really appreciative for you being a part of the conversation each week as we grapple with these questions that we're asking and trying to navigate a very complex web of policies and procedures and executive orders and trends and surveys and webinars and AI impacts and social media influences on our students, and using that as part of our if, for lack of a better word, group therapy, but also a way to help come together as an industry and talk through some of the key issues each week and how we might be adapting how we do what we do in our field to better reach our prospective student audiences. So as we do each week, we take our news stories from that newsletter, then give you the more in-depth takes from on Wednesday, as opposed to the hot takes you get in the social media sound bites you get throughout the week for those news stories that you see coming out. Now, first question of the day is, how should we change how we reach future students? And this is always an interesting topic to cover on the Roundup because it goes to the heart of some of our core principles of international enrollment and international student recruitment, is having a presence where your audience spends its time, and that's live where your audiences live. And if you've been familiar with what we've talked about here on the Roundup, what we have written about extensively through our 6 Ps on strategic international enrollment management, what I'm about to say when we talk about knowing where your students spend their time, having a presence, defined presence on those platforms, and having an opportunity to really take advantage and meet them where they are on the platforms they're spending their time on, and with messaging that resonates with the audiences that you're intending to talk about. There are a couple of surveys that have come out recently that I'll share with you today. First up is the E-Expectations Report. This has come out regularly for the last couple decades, frankly, since e-news about e-interactions and digital connections that students were making, probably since the dawn of Facebook and before that even, with email communication and how students were preferring to take in information and how institutions could modify how they talked about their institutions and all of that. So with the rise of the internet and obviously the rise of social media, we've seen where students spend their time has changed. It started on obviously Facebook, and it's widely accepted that in the U.S. Facebook is not exactly where domestic students spend the majority of their time. They're on Insta, they're on TikTok as their primary platforms, and maybe there's others coming up quickly, but they're not spending a whole lot of time on Facebook anymore. However, internationally, there are many countries where students are still largely spending time on Facebook. They'll mix up platforms as well, and they'll be on their versions of messaging apps that are dominant in their countries. It might be WhatsApp in India and Indonesia. It might be Zalotalk if you're in Vietnam. It might be Line if you're in Japan. And a whole different ecosystem in China of QQ and Douyin and other versions of social media that we have in the U.S. that are active in China, WeChat especially. So knowing those details, what platforms are most insightful is helpful to help you identify where you need to be spending your time. But you also need to have a better sense of what content is really driving student interest. What are they really searching for? What kind of topics do they want institutions to be addressing? Is it safety? Is it return on investment? Is it internships? Is it campus life? What are those topics that are really at the top of their list? Return on investment, we've seen internationally since the pandemic, has really risen up the ranks. Many more markets that used to be fairly reliable sources of full fee paying students are now less so, because those students, economies after the pandemic, during the pandemic and afterwards, have been slower to recover, and families' disposable income has reduced. Their savings might have been tapped during those times during the pandemic where employment might not have been as certain. So the range of countries that students are looking at has grown dramatically in terms of other markets, more sub-region or regional markets that are regional players that are trying to become more significant destinations for international students. We've seen that especially in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. We've also seen other European destinations beyond the UK really rise up. Germany, France, Italy, even Spain have gained momentum in recent years, and a smaller country as prolific as Finland has become much more engaged internationally and is making agreements with institutions in India and other countries to really bolster their ties, international ties. Really encouraging to see so many more countries joining that international student mobility chase for talent. And in the United States, we're certainly not immune to that. We've seen our numbers continually grow. And this fall, to be honest with you, we'll probably see for the third time in 25 years a decrease in international students. We saw a couple of years post 9/11, 2003, 2004, where we had declines. We've seen in recent years, we saw with the pandemic, we saw a decline in 2021, where there was a dip in the overall numbers because students weren't getting in, or for fall of 2020, obviously significant drops in new students. But overall, we've seen an upward trend in the number of international students coming to the United States, and we've seen our overall population in the last just 25 years grow from about 400,000 to 1.3 million if you look at the SEVIS by the numbers data that captures end of 2024 numbers. So the numbers of students studying in the U.S. has continually grown. We've been fortunate. We have the most highly ranked institutions in whatever ranking systems you're looking at. In terms of global rankings, our institutions are always widely represented. We've got the greatest diversity of quality, location, climate, programs, campus life, all of the things that, and student body, in fact, where diversity of our campuses and our student bodies is a high priority of who we are and the experiences we want our students to have. And we're also the place most best equipped to handle more international students with the purpose-built housing that we typically have on most university campuses, with the campus culture that we develop through our programming, through our residence hall systems, through the nature of undergraduate education in the United States that develops activities and organizations that students can join. So we have so much value to talk about as institutions in the United States, individually as campuses, that we sometimes without knowing it, we take the easy way because, well, let's say we've got certain core values as an institution that here's X, Y, and Z that we typically say in our publications, that we feature on our website. But increasingly, I'm finding fewer institutions apply those values internationally in terms of how they talk about themselves. They might be different. My previous institution, UNLV, affordability was one of the key components that was part of our messaging because as a state institution, we have substantial financial aid and scholarships available for domestic students. But that doesn't fly internationally. We had some scholarships, but I don't know if that made it affordable. And what we had to do is talk about affordability in a different context for an international audience as opposed to a domestic one, because it would be false of us to claim that what we give international students is the same as what we give domestic students in terms of aid, and it clearly is not the case. And at every state institution in the country, that's not the case. Nobody gives as much aid to international students as they do domestic students from state institutions. And there will be private institutions, the Ivies, that will give that are need blind and will give their aid out based on to basically whatever a family needs that they don't have themselves, they can provide. Very few schools do that, but that's the difference. For us in the United States, we have, again, a plethora of institutions, so many geographical locations, so many sizes, from small liberal arts colleges of 800 to 2,000 up to massive state institutions that have 50, 60,000 students on campus of many thousands of acres, to city universities that are maybe 8 to 10,000 students, somewhere in the middle there. And the variety we have is just overwhelming in terms of what we can offer. But my question to you, and there's two reports here. There's the E-Expectations report, and there's also the Keystone Education Group report that talks about what tricks maybe U.S. institutions are missing in terms of messages to international students that would make more sense than what we typically are sending now. And as I mentioned earlier, part of what our challenge as institutions is distinguishing our core institutional values and reinterpreting those and what that might mean for an international audience. And for few of us are doing that effectively. Those that are probably getting ahead of the game. The other thing the Keystone Group makes mention of in their report is what we are not doing is a very good job of is extolling, and I've said this before many times here on the Roundup, is we're not doing a very good job of extolling the values of the United States as a nation and as higher education in general. And this is the distinguishing factor, I think. I talk about this in all the consults I do with individual institutions. I talk about it with when we talk about having perspective in the 6 Ps, having that global perspective, having that national perspective. What are the things the country is doing right? And we all know that there's a lot of things the administration is doing wrong policy-wise that is impacting what we do in international education in the last 6 months, 7 months now. But we know that our challenge is to communicate the value, not just of our institutions, but we also have to convince these students that the U.S. is the right destination for them. Because another phenomenon we've seen over the last 6-7 years is students are applying not just to institutions in the United States, like 2 or 3 institutions in the U.S. They might be applying to one institution or 2 institutions in 4 or 5 countries. Maybe the big 4, they're applying to all 4. Maybe they're applying to a backup, a safety country. Now, we always used to still do in a lot of ways, about what's your safety school. Like my son is going to be a sophomore in high school this year. Pretty soon we're going to start having those conversations about where he's going to go. Will it be where I'm going, where I'm working at the time? Maybe that he'll get tuition remission, or will he want to spread his wings and go further afield? And if so, let's talk options. Having safety countries might be a thing now. I don't know, but one of the things these students are now checking out is and keeping an eye on is what are the relative values of studying in the United States versus Canada versus UK versus India, Thailand, perhaps Vietnam as the destination for their higher education, depending on where they are in the world. That might be on their radar. So how are we talking about the U.S.? Do we need to be talking about the U.S.? And the answer is obviously yes, as the values of the U.S. And there's, like I said, there's less positive news coming out of the government in terms of policy, but what we can hold on to are, once they're in the United States, the benefits that they have as an international student in terms of CPT, OPT, STEM OPT, and the opportunities to advance themselves in their careers, to develop themselves as people, to broaden their horizons in terms of their network, the skills that they will learn on our campuses in liberal arts environments that really help develop the whole person attitude with frankly, what I tell students, if all they do is come to our campus as undergraduates and get a perfect grade point average, but don't get involved in classes, don't participate in events, don't do internships or career opportunities that help develop their skill set for the job that they're going to be applying for, if they don't take advantage of those out of classroom experiences that really help shape who they are as a person, as a young adult, they've missed out on 90% of what the college experience is meant to be in the United States, not just getting good grades. It's preparing for that next step in your life and developing your networks and developing your skill sets that will help you no matter what you do in your chosen career path. So there's so many benefits of our campuses, the way they're set up as residential communities, as completely programmed communities with activities, organizations, sports, whole person education, even spiritual education, depending on where they are and this individual student's needs in that regard. We provide that full range of services that frankly does not exist to the same extent anywhere else in the world in a non-U.S. context. Maybe there are U.S. campuses that some of the more longer-standing ones that might exist that are able to replicate some of those features, but certainly none to the extent that main campuses do. So those are how should we change how we reach students? We need to change our messaging, and particularly in these uncertain times. One of the articles that I shared in the newsletter this week that I'll be sharing the link to is an article from Forbes that says one of the 5 takeaways or 5 things that U.S. International ed professionals should be sharing with incoming students right now in terms of what to expect with the visa interview. Here's how we can help you along the way. All the different things that we need to be communicating policy changes and how our institution might be affected by those, how we change how we communicate with prospective students. All of these things, government policy-wise, need to be communicated. And if you're not communicating some of these changes, like the new visa reciprocity fee, how many of you have sent messages out about that? That's something that students need to know about, because that's you don't want students to go into the visa process, this last step before they get on a plane to come here, and have surprises, sudden fees that they're going to have to pay that they weren't expecting. The more you can prepare them for the path that they're about to walk down, the better chances are you're going to enroll a satisfied student who feels like you've prepared them well for what they're about to go through. So that's all of there's always, should always be a work in progress, never the same old calm flow year after year. You need to be flexible, you need to be adaptable, you need to be changing where those messages are going out, and the content of those messages needs to be examined on a regular basis. It's a big lift, but if you build in functional review processes every year to do that, then you're putting yourself in a position to make sure you're adapting well and adapting your messaging to your key markets in ways that they need to be receiving. So that's all we have for that first question. Second one is, what do spring surveys suggest about our fall numbers? There's been a couple different surveys recently assessing institutions' application volume for the fall. That surveys that were taken this spring, including the IE's spring snapshot survey that they do. They do a fall and a spring version. And this latest version for the spring surveyed about 559 institutions, I think it was. And the results were mixed. There were about a third that were expecting an increase in students, a third that saying expecting about the same, and a third that were expecting a decrease. And this is before the visa pause and the social media vetting. So this happened in April, before all of that happened the last week of May. So and those results are not particularly bright. A third positive, third negative, third about the same. I guarantee you, we do those surveys now. You're going to be seeing a lot of institutions, particularly those that are heavily dependent on the Indian market, will be looking at 30 to 50% drops in new international students this fall. And that's frightening. It's frightening when you think about if your institution is heavily or overly dependent on one or two countries for new students each year, and if India is one of them, you're going to be taking a huge hit. Agents on the ground have been certainly sharing that experiences at securing visas for those that hadn't secured them before the end of May pause to visa appointments. We're now 2 months past that, the 1 month deadline, and another further month, and we're still seeing drips and drabs of students even getting appointments. One student was only able to secure in India an appointment for January or February 5th. I mean, how embarrassing is that if you're the Indian U.S. embassies and consulates in India, if you're not able to offer students for this fall appointments in July, mid-July can't get an appointment till February because of the changes that have been put in place. The month pause is the worst possible time of the year to have a pause for interviews, and the new social media vetting that now is and probably placing extra burdens on the visa officers and the consular officers doing those interviews. So how are we going to dig ourselves out of this hole? Other colleagues having a conversation last week with Ben Waxman at INTED. Staffing at embassies is coming. It's going to continue to be an issue, and even more so because later this summer, early fall, we heard about the State Department layoffs domestically for their civil service and domestically based foreign service officers, having over 1,300 lose their jobs. Their colleagues who work as foreign service officers at posts around the world now, or soon to be, they're saying that they're expecting a similar purge. If it will be as significant, I don't know, on the foreign service ranks for those that are out in the field. So this will pose huge issues down the road. And I surmised this last week that this visa processing that we do in the United States is very labor intensive. It is by requiring the in-person visa interview, it adds extra layers of difficulty onto the process that students are very much limited by the capacity of each consulate and embassy in terms of their availability to do physical appointments. Is a move to virtual appointments coming that might free up more bandwidth to do these, and who does them? Maybe it can be done globally instead of just in country. Is it potentially doing what, frankly, the other big four countries do and just have a third-party company or agency do the processing, and there's no requirement for a visa in-person interview? That might be a cost savings. I don't know, in terms of the personnel, by reducing our foreign service personnel overseas that it will be at posts around the world. If we're reducing those numbers, if that's the next step in this administration's attempts to cost save and reduce bloat in the federal government. If that's the goal, one of the efficiencies they may look at is, well, do we really need to do in-person interviews when we are having all the security checks are being done remotely? That doesn't require somebody to be physically present for an interview. And maybe it's only those that have issues with their social media that we need to have them come in, and only when there's a problem do you invite someone in for that visa interview. So it's substantially cutting down on that volume of in-person visa interviews. So might that be, and maybe that's best case pie in the sky thinking, or potential hidden positive, because in my opinion, eliminating the visa interview and making F1 visa be a dual intent category, non-immigrant and immigrant intent potentially, because you can do both as an F1, even though at the front end of the process, given the way it's currently set, as a non-immigrant visa category, you cannot say your plan is to emigrate to the U.S. when you're done with your studies, because that defeats the purpose of a non-immigrant visa. So changing the intent of F1 would be the dream scenario, and secondarily, if you can't get that, eliminating the visa interview eliminates the backlog and problems we always have in the summer months with processing. If that gets farmed off to a third party to do the actual security checks and the social media checks, given certain pre-established standards across the country or across the world by embassies and consulates, then that maybe that will be a silver lining in an otherwise very dark year so far for international education in the U.S. But so the surveys certainly pretend a downturn this fall, and the question will be how many, how significant a drop are we going to look at this fall? Will it be COVID-esque in terms of the volume of decrease we're going to see for new international students this fall? Where basically borders were shut, and unless they were transferring from within the United States, you weren't getting a lot of new international students. It would be just a trickle. I don't think it's going to be that severe. We've already gotten comparative numbers to last fall for Akron. We're going to be down. I don't know the exact numbers, but we're like ahead slightly in master's degree grad students. We're down slightly in grad or PhD. Internationals were down slightly in undergrad right now. We're still a month to go before classes start. So we'll see where we end up. There's a lot can happen in a month, as we know. But the survey numbers from the spring certainly starting our early warning bells for what I think we're all going to be experiencing later in the next month or two. Quite substantial drops in new international students, and that. The light will certainly go on for a lot of campuses to be looking at other options, like I've been talking about what we're doing at Akron quite openly here. We're looking at transnational education options as a real way to not necessarily get headcount on campus initially. Some of these will take 2-3 years to develop, but the time would have been 2-3 years ago to start developing some of these, but I just got there. So we're in January, so we're well along the road with 2 or 3 options, and looking at, frankly, bandwidth of some of our departments to handle increased volume that we might be bringing them, and certainly at the undergrad level, there might be a few more challenges in that than at the grad level. But we're finding those willing partners on campus to really push the boat out and make themselves a priority for the institution, and by showing that they're willing to play ball and willing to enroll. To increase their capacity and develop their skill set and their in terms of international enrollments and ability to host students in various formats around the world, online, in person, or hybrid. So outside the United States as well. So that's what we're looking at, and certainly the more flexible your campuses are, the better your chances of surviving this and preparing for a future that isn't as heavily dependent on just campus-based enrollments. So we'll be keeping our eyes peeled for opportunities around the world, and certainly as they pop up and we see other examples, not just where I am, but around the world that might be attractive examples for you to take back to your home institution and say, hey, we really need to be looking at this T&E. It's happening, and if we're not on the train, it's going to leave the station without us, and we won't be the first. In certain markets, we'll be 10th or 11th, and that comes at a price. So let's switch gears for the last few minutes to talk about visa fees. This is prompted by a couple stories this week. Past week, we all learned that we have, in the United States, we now have a visa integrity fee that was rolled up in the big, beautiful bill that was passed by Congress. And that adds an extra $250 onto the fees that students pay. The details are sparse in terms of what that is, who collects it, when it's collected, but it's collected before before any visa applicant, not just students, before they go for their visa interviews. They pay that usually, and it sounds like the way it was framed in the language, that it to be a DHS fee taken along or in line with the I-901 fee, the SEVIS fee that they have to pay, international students have to pay. This would be a new fee for other non-immigrant visa types like a B or H or others that students might be applying for, that some categories of visa applicants might be paying for, other than the DS-160 fee, which is obviously right now international students pay the I-901 fee and then the DS-160 fee. With this addition, you now have the visa integrity fee, so it's $190 for the SEVIS fee, to then be able to apply for the DS-160, which is $160 plus, $185. Some countries it's a little bit more, and then now the visa integrity fee. The one thing about the integrity fee is it is refundable, so that process is less clear, but it's only refundable after their visa status ends. They can apply for reimbursement, and most students will have forgotten that by the time they graduate. But the fees around the world, the other part of this is that you have the fees that we now are charging, the visa integrity fees in the U.S., starting I think July 1st that happened, or whenever the bill was finally passed, a little after that I think. But you also have an article coming out of India, and Indians are always on top of the ever-changing rules and regulations and fees charged by different countries. And they that article shared that with recent news, Australia has more than doubled their visa fees. They now charge, and thank you, Marcy, for reacting. Hope you're well in India. Looking forward to catching up with you later this summer, fall. We are within this Indian article, they talked about Australia. They're now the most expensive country to apply to for a visa. Their visa fees are now over $1,300 US. They're at the top end. Next is the UK at $703, Canada $565, New Zealand $526 or $506. Then we have Ireland at 486, or excuse me, 186, my handwriting is terrible, 186. And just to give you a sense, this article was written before the inclusion of the integrity fee, so that's not figured into this. They only had the number at 184, the equivalent US or of the Indian rupee fee. So I'm curious if they're thinking that's the 901 fee or the DS-160 fee. Now you now have kind of three fees, so it's more like close to $650. So really it's beyond, after Australia, UK, US is probably next with all three of those fees combined. It's probably about $650, and then Canada at $565. So New Zealand $506. And that goes all the way down, looks at Sweden, $185, and a couple others, and down to Singapore at only $56 or $46, so not bad for a student visa. So a lot of variety there with visa fees around the world, but that is a little bit of that perspective we always talk about is, yes, we've added a new fee. Yes, it's not ideal given everything else that's been changing in the international education sphere in the United States recently, but look at the larger picture on perspective. Our tuitions are higher, but our visa application fees are not the highest. Yay. We're second or third on the list. Third on the list right now after the UK and Australia. So that's a little bit for what we have for you this week on the Roundup. Thank you for everybody who's been watching live and those who are watching on repeat later or listening to the audio-only podcast. Thanks for making the Midweek Roundup part of your international edification this week. Have a great rest of your week and look forward to chatting with you again next week. Cheers.